Iran's foreign minister has accused Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of attacking his country to deliberately derail nuclear negotiations with the United States. President Donald Trump told reporters at the G7 summit in Canada that we just heard from Andrew Clennell that he believes Iran wants to de-escalate its conflict with Israel, noting that Tehran was not winning this war. Well, joining me live now is Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, Dr. Trita Parsi, who is an expert on Iran and US relations. Trita, thanks so much for your time this morning. Donald Trump says that Iran wants to talk about de-escalation, and there's reports that Iran is seeking a return to talks with the US as well. What's your reaction to that, and do you think it's genuine?
I'm not so sure that those reports actually are true. I'm not seeing any willingness from the Iranian side quite yet to restore negotiations. What the foreign minister have said is that they would do so once the Israelis stop bombing. The Iranians are essentially not going to negotiate while the Israelis are continuing this war of aggression. So I think some of those headlines and some of those stories may be a bit exaggerated. I think we have to keep in mind that in a situation like this, there's going to be a tremendous amount of misinformation, false information. So I'm not convinced that the situation has come to that yet. I would very much obviously like to see that happening, but I don't see it yet.
Seeing this as a non-expert, it seems like there is no good options for the Ayatollah regime in Iran. Further retaliation risks being insufficient to deter future attacks and prompting Israel to hit back harder. Any retreat or a nuclear deal with the United States that seriously curbs Iran's enrichment capacity would be seen internally as a complete capitulation. Where do you see this going?
I think you put your finger on it. Curbing the program is one thing. The Iranians have already agreed to that. The problem is that Trump, halfway through the negotiations, adopted the Israeli position, which was not about curbing the program, but eliminating the program. And that's why we're in this situation right now. If Trump had stuck to his original red line of no weaponization and had only sought to limit the program, make sure that it could only be used for civilian purposes, we would probably have had a deal by now. But he shifted his position, which caused a stalemate. But I think you're right, though. Continuing the war is not a good option for the Iranians, but it's also not a good option for the Israelis. In fact, if they were so successful, they wouldn't have gone back to Washington 48 hours into this and asking the U.S. to step into the war. So I think this is a lose-lose proposition at this point. The question is, when does Trump realize that unless he steps in to stop the war, he may be forced to enter the war? And that would be devastating for the United States, and it would be devastating for Trump's own presidency, because his own base, the America First base, is dead set against entering this war.
And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, beyond the immediate goal of destroying Iran's nuclear capability, wants regime change in Iran. How likely is that, and how soon do you think it could happen?
We have no historical examples of regime change happening as a result of an air war. That's just a historical reality. That's not to say that that is not what he's seeking. He is clearly trying to stir up unrest in some of Iran's border areas. The attacks against the TV station, assassinations of political leaders, etc., is all aimed at bringing about some form of a regime collapse. And we have to make a distinction here between regime collapse and regime change. Regime collapse is what, the regime essentially collapses, but is not replaced with anything. Regime change is when, Netanyahu, or in the case of the U.S. and Iraq in 2003, had some form of a government in the waiting. I don't think actually it's regime change Netanyahu is looking for. He's looking for regime collapse.